Ready for more stories? Welcome to Reminiscing, our Highline history, a radio show presenting the memories of our community in the Highline area. Listen to a new episode every week, Monday and Tuesday, with your host, Roger Price, at 106.5 LP FM, South King County.
Hi, I'm Roger Price. I'm a volunteer here at the Highline Heritage Museum. And today I have another guest, Dave Hester, that's going to give us a little background on his growing up in Burien. His dad had a hardware store in Burien for many years, starting back in 1953. And it was just kind of next door to the cleaners that our museum is next door to. So I'm going to kind of let Dave kind of get started on his growing up here, and we'll go from there.
Well, thank you, Roger, and it's an honor to be here, talk about my growing up in this area. And I was thinking last night, it seems that most of my youth was within about 1 or 2 square miles of where we're sitting right now. I grew up in a house on 146 where Safeway store is now sitting, and our lot went back through the woods at that time to 148th. So we had a long lot, a long narrow lot, and had a lot of memories of growing up in that house. I went to school at Chelsea Park Elementary and spent the first 6 years there, and then Puget Sound Junior High on First Avenue. And then from there went to Highline High School, graduated in 1961. So that's kind of my youth. Went to junior college, Highline and Skagit Valley, and then was in the Coast Guard Reserve for a number of years. So that was kind of my youth growing up.
That was very interesting. And I know you mentioned one time that around where your whole house was, there was wasn't it kind of, was there chicken farms in there?
Yeah, there were some chicken farms. In fact, we had our own playhouse that we built in the back of our lot, kind of next to some chicken farms, and scrapped some boards. And of course, my dad, we'll get into this a little bit, he had a hardware store, so anytime we needed supplies like nails, whatever, we'd walk up to the store and get our bag of nails and come back and pound a few more nails into our playhouse.
Yeah, kids were pretty innovative back in those days, anyway, and they used whatever was things that was available to build a camp or a fort or whatever. So, and it wasn't far from the Burien playfield. You were probably just a stone's throw from there, and the
Mosier Field. Spent a lot of days there, and was pretty much out of trouble because I was at the field most of the time. And gentleman by the name of Dick Geiselman, who was a former Seattle Rainier, was in charge of Mosier Field, both of the playfield, as well as the Coliseum there.
Yeah, the gymnasium, the field house,
which eventually was moved down the street to
the Root School.
The Root School.
Mm-hmm.
Remember watching that go down.
Oh yes,
going down the highway there.
I had a lot of pictures in the Highline Times that showed the field house on the rollers going down 152nd and getting under the power lines.
That was pretty. So anyway, a lot of my youth was spent in sports. I gravitated toward baseball primarily. I played Little League baseball. In those days, we only had 4 teams here in Highline area. There were Sunnydale Oilers, Seahurst Oilers, Highline Chamber of Commerce had a team, and the Seattle Trust Bankers had a team. So there's only 4 teams in this entire area. I can't imagine what the numbers are now. And so I was very fortunate to play Little League baseball, I think 9, 10, 11, until I was 12 years old. And then after that, Babe Ruth League kind of took over. I never did make the Babe Ruth team. I don't remember if I turned out or just didn't make it. And so we gravitated back down to Mosier Field, where Dick Geiselman formed a team of those of us that needed to play ball.
Uh-huh.
And I thought about it the other day, but one of the catchers at that time was a young fella, about 9 years old, 10 years old. I was 12. I was a pitcher. He was a catcher. His name was Jim Rice. And Dr. Rice, as we know him now, I just met him several weeks ago at the Highline alumni golf tournament. And he sat next to me and I said, Jim Rice, I said, by any chance, were you a catcher back, when we were all youth? And he said, yes, I was. He said, I was your catcher. So Jim was a surgeon here at Highline Hospital for a number of years. He's now retired. So
Wow, yeah, that's a brought
talk
back.
about a small world. Huh?
That's exactly right. Wow.
So anyway, those are fun years. And then I went to Highline High School. I played baseball there for the Highline Pirates, and we had a pretty good team. We won some games, we lost some games. Coach there, Leonard Tazioli, was a big influence to me in growing up in high school. We had a young guy by the name of Tom Adams, who was our star, and he was scouted every game by Chicago Cubs scout, and eventually signed at the end of our senior year. I think he made $10,000 and spent it all that one summer. He was the guy that always bought us hamburgers at Lou's, and had a brand new car. I think he paid $2,500 for it, and pretty much squandered that $10,000 that one summer. But Tom went off to play minor league ball and never did flourish beyond that point. Tom has since passed away.
Yes, I remember hearing about Tom. He was a little older than I was, but he had another brother, Bill Adams, that was just a year or so older than I was. But yeah, Tom was a good athlete.
Well, he was an excellent athlete and great. He was our quarterback on the Highline football team and had a chance to go to the University of Washington on a scholarship, but chose baseball instead. So anyway, those were fun years. But then in the summer, we played American Legion ball, and that was what we did during my sophomore and junior summers. Kirk's Pharmacy up here in Seahurst. Bill Kirk was our coach. His dad owned Kirk's Pharmacy, was our sponsor. And we played, one summer we played 30 games just about every other night during that summer. So we didn't have any trouble finding time, or we just loved baseball that much. And Bill Kirk was a great coach. So we had awful lot of fun.
Yes, Kirk Pharmacy. There was actually had a couple locations, one up on First Avenue,
Right.
and then the one in Seahurst. And he sponsored a lot of different teams, whether it be baseball or basketball. So that was quite a help for a lot of the youth in this area.
Yeah, I still see Bill Kirk once in a while. I missed him this summer. I hope he's okay. But he's a season ticket holder with the Seattle Mariners, and every time I go to a game, I always go down to where his seats are and say hello. But I missed him this summer, so I hope he's still around. So.
Oh yes, well, I know I had an interview with Jim Bibby here a few weeks back, and he was a class of 58, but he was also on the baseball team. Probably he had graduated probably by the time you were there at Highline. But we had a lot of good ball players. I think that you mentioned Sunnydale Oilers. I know that Jim and my brother Norm, they both were on one of the very first little league team in Burien for the Oilers. So they I've forgotten the coach's name.
George Love.
Well, George Love was one of the coaches at the time. Yeah, Pop Angel. But those were you guys had a lot of good times playing at the Burien playfield there.
Yeah, a lot of good memories there. So.
Yes, and then you got into you were probably starting to work in your dad's hardware store too.
Yes, I did. Roger, my dad opened up Hester Hardware in 1953, and I was about 11 and 12 years old then, and I had a chance to work in there and learn how to make change and wait on customers. And and I worked off and on all the way through high school as one of the employees, either part-time or full-time in the summertime. So Dad started his business, actually came to Highline in Burien in 1935. His uncle was the owner of Bungie Lumber, which is just kitty corner from the Highline Museum here. And so Dad worked there for a number of years, and then went into was in the Navy, and was overseas for a number of years. In fact, I was 3 years old by the time he came home. From there, he went down to Five Corners and formed a partnership with Alan Knutson. Called Hester Knutson Hardware and Oil, I think is the name of it. My dad delivered oil around the houses. They had some lumber and they had some coal, and he was there for a number of years until they opened up Hester Hardware in 1935. And then after Hester Hardware, Dad merged with Bob Allen, who was the owner of Burien Hardware. They met at the Seattle Trust Bank one afternoon. Dad was over there to pay off a $1,000 note that he had borrowed to buy lawnmowers that previous summer. And he and Bob got to talking that they weren't getting any younger, and they'd sure like to have more time to do things. So they shook hands, and that was the beginning of a merger with Burien Hardware. So all the inventory that came out of our store, Hester Hardware, went up to the Burien Hardware building, which was a lot larger, and that became part of their partnership. So, and they ran that for a number of years. I'd have to say 10, 15 years, and then eventually auctioned off everything in the store: shells, nails, paint, you name it. And that was how they ended their business. So.
Oh yes, it was, and that business was along 152nd, and it was pretty close to where that dog park is there now. I believe.
Right. Yeah, it was right next to Bill's of Burien, or Lamont's, as we used to know it back then.
Mm-hmm.
But on that side of the street, across from the jewelry store.
Yes, I remember going in there and buying nails by the pound. You'd put it in the basket there and weigh your nails. Yeah.
You don't do that anymore, do you?
No, those were and then and before he merged, then he had the store that is kind of behind, next door to the cleaners, and his wasn't the Sunnydale oil store.
No, it was the one next to that. Yeah,
okay.
That was our store. Yeah, and right across the street from that, during those years, was the Burien Theater, the old Burien Theater.
The Den. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we used to go to movies there, my brother and I, on Saturdays. My folks would drop us off, and we would watch a double header. I don't know, 25, 50 cents to get in, something like that. Usually Gene Autry and
oh yeah,
and those types.
Smiley Burdette or somebody like that.
Yeah. We were thrilled to go, and it was a place for to hang out. So then after the movie, we walk across the street to Dad's store, and then somehow we get a ride home. But yeah, but Dad had a good business. He was very customer service oriented. He worked hard. Thinking back, we were open 6 days a week from 8 to 6. Customers came in, they'd find what they want and say, "Hey, Earl, charge it." So Dad had to know that person's name and what he bought. We had those cardboard ledgers in a file.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way we kept track of things. And then at the end of the month, my mother at home would put together invoices, and we'd sit around for a couple of days straight, stuffing envelopes, licking envelopes, taking them to the post office, and mailing our invoice. So he carried a lot of credit. Not too many people stiffed him. I use that word. Either they couldn't pay or they'd make arrangements. And Dad was always very lenient about that. So had a lot of following, a lot of people. I remember when we closed the store, there was people who came in and said, "Oh, you can't do that. This is the place I love to come." And And so we tried to steer them over to the other building, Period Hardware. So,
Yes, and then uh, I think Five Corners had her lumber, and and then there was then kind of the developed into when the big box stores came around too, and that was a little bit hard on the merchants in Burien, but
that was hard. Yeah, the thing that I think hurt my dad more than anything was businesses that opened up and sold on Sunday. To him, Sunday was the day of rest, and you worked so hard, and then people would I forget the name of the box store you're talking about. They were selling lawnmowers and paint, and
it could have been Pay and Pack or Lowe's or maybe.
I can't remember the name of those harder, but that bothered him a lot. But at Christmas time, boy, I tell you, those were long days, and we'd be open at night till 9 o'clock during the Christmas season. And Christmas didn't start until way after Thanksgiving. Not like it is now. See Christmas trees in the store. Here we are in November, but you officially didn't start Christmas until right after Thanksgiving, and then it was just a marathon right up until the last day. And I just remember my dad being home, and on Christmas Eve, that was his day off, so to speak. But he was just always so tired during that holiday time. And then we go back after January 1st, and you've got to do inventory to see if to see where you are on your books. And so my brother and I and mom and a couple of friends, we go in on Saturdays, Saturday nights, Sunday, and inventory everything, just literally everything that was on the shelf. And then that gave them an idea of where we were. So,
and I'm sure once if we got a little snow storm or something, everybody would come looking for a sled.
Yeah.
And then
or shovels.
Yes, shovels would be top of the list.
Yeah, so you try to anticipate that, try to have those items.
Yes, and some winters we may not have any snow, and others we might have 18 inches of snow. So it's hard to tell.
Yeah, just didn't know around here in those days. So,
but your dad, it was his uncle that owned the Bungee lumber.
Correct. Yeah, his uncle also owned the store up in White Center. And so Dad was invited to come out and work. He grew up in Spokane, and that's where he was when he came over here. And my mother also grew up in Spokane. They got to know each other a little bit at North Central in Spokane, and then she came over here with her mother, and of course, then from there on, then they became a pair. And I was born in 1942. Dad went off to war. He went to Hawaii for a while, and then after the bombing, went to Saipan. And like I said earlier, didn't get home until I was almost 3 years old.
So yeah, you missed. He didn't get to see you for 3 years.
Yeah, well, I was born, and he was here then, and then overseas and stationed overseas, Pearl Harbor for a while. Right after the bombing in Pearl Harbor, was over there to help with the cleanup, and then from there went into Saipan. So.
Oh yes, and so then he came home around 1945.
Around 45. Yeah, I was 3 years old at that point. Right. So there was a little interruption in their life, but that was what a lot of families went through.
Sure.
So wasn't unusual to have that happen.
Yes. And that's when he went to Five Corners, was it, or
Five Corners was in 1945. So he came home, and he and Alan Knudsen, and I was named after Alan. My middle name is Alan A. And they formed a partnership and had their store down there for a number of years. So.
Yes, there wasn't many stores around Five Corners back then at that time either.
Store sat right where Sherman Williams is today, right kind of across the street from Trader Joe's. And it was only Five Corners at that time, and so a very, very quiet.
I think, yeah, and Five Corners Nursery was probably across the street.
Directly across the street, yeah.
Mhm.
Bells are ringing.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Balzerini brothers, yeah.
They were all very good friends. So then my folks built their house on 146. Dad put a lot of labor into building it himself. And that house eventually was sold and picked up and moved up near the top hat.
Oh, it went up there.
Avenue. I remember my mother standing in the road as the house was going down the street, crying her eyes out because her house was leaving. But they were into close to retirement age and retirement mode, and so they went out to another home they bought out in Des Moines.
Uh-huh.
That's where they were at that time. So,
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. And you were just 5 minutes away from Chelsea Park grade school.
yeah, walked to school every day.
Uh-huh.
In fact, we walked home from Puget Sound Junior High down First Avenue pretty much every night.
Yeah, before there was too many junior highs around, there was Puget Sound.
Sylvester was the other one.
Uh-huh.
Those are the only two I can remember at the time.
Yeah. So yeah, that's quite a hike. Well, I think kids did a lot. They had to do a lot of walking. There wasn't the
Yeah.
bus service
No,
back
we didn't
then.
have a bus service.
So
Have a bus service in those days. But Chelsea Park was a good grade school, and I was there through the sixth grade. I had a lot of friends that kept in touch during those years. So it's good period.
yes. So then then you, like you said, you graduated in
61.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Went to Highline. Well, Highline Community College was pretty brand new at that time.
it was, yeah. Yeah, it was fairly new, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and ended up at Skagit Valley up in Mount Vernon for several quarters, almost a full year. Went over to Olympic Junior College in Bremerton for a while, and then, like I say, took some classes at Highline, and then just kind of restless, and ended up going to U.S. Coast Guard, and spent 6 months of active duty, and it was about 6.5 years of active reserve, where we attended meetings once a week, and then a couple more years of inactive reserve in the U.S. Coast Guard.
So you probably went to Alameda.
Alameda.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was our boot camp. Yeah.
That my brother went exact
Oh,
same.
did he?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, down there. And I was fortunate enough to get on the honor guard only because I was tall. They needed tall guys. And so we practiced and practiced and practiced. And then we participated in several parades around the country. We flew on these Coast Guard cargo planes, came up here for the several parades that take place in Seattle.
Oh, the Seafair Parade or
Seafair
something. Uh-huh.
Parade, and Ballard had a parade, Lake City had a parade, I remember that. And we went to Utah, to Salt Lake, and marched in a parade there. So that was all part of my 12-week of boot camp, and I felt very fortunate I could get away from boot camp for those periods of time. We were my cousin happened to be in the same unit that I was in, and he played the trumpet, so he was in the band part, and like I said, I was tall and I could carry a rifle and spin it, and we practiced doing all that stuff. So we were pretty good. We won some trophies, but once we got back to Alameda, then of course we had to make up for the time that we were away. Of course, the other cadets were pretty hard on us because they were envious that we got to leave.
Oh, yeah.
During those weekends that we were gone. So.
Yeah, well, that was pretty interesting part of your life too. And then where did you meet your wife at and different?
I met my wife at believe it or not, at Dag's it was Lou's, excuse me, it's Lou's Drive-In here on First Avenue. used to be Lou's,
Uh-huh.
First Avenue, and
Sure, it's a Taco Bell now. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that was
So it
Lou's.
after a football game. She went to Cleveland High School. She's 2 years younger than I am. So I think she was a sophomore, I was a senior, or I was a junior, and she was a freshman. I don't remember exactly, but we met, just happened. That was our first time of meeting. And then we dated my brother-in-law, Art Case, who went to Highline. He was my good friend. And Art introduced me to my wife, Nancy, and his wife, Joan, is our sisters. So Nancy and Joan are sisters. So we double dated several times. And then after my Coast Guard stints, we were married, and we've been married 59 years.
Oh, congratulations.
In May. So we've had a lot of fun. We've raised 2 boys, and very proud of both of them. My older son lives in Bend, Oregon. He's retired now, retired engineer with Honeywell. And my other son, Brent, is 4 years younger than his brother, and he's a teacher in the Highline School District, or excuse me, in the Seattle School District. And he teaches at Nova High School, which is an alternative high school, and he's bilingual Spanish, and so he deals a lot with Spanish-speaking families, and so they're both great kids, and we're very, very fortunate. I have one granddaughter, Kira, who's 31 years old, lives in Atlanta, Georgia. Unfortunately, that's too far for us to see him as often as we'd like. And then she has a little boy, or great grandson, named Elliot, and he's 3.5 years old. So we see him as often as we can, but not as often as we'd like. But we have a great family. I'm very proud of every one of them. And Nancy and I have had a great life living up in this area. We live out in Covington now, and I do get to veer in as often as I can. We still have our dentist here, and so we drive through. I like to park the car and just walk down the street once in a while just to see the difference in some of the buildings.
Oh, yes. And there's been a few differences
for sure.
over the years.
For sure.
Yeah, there were I think the 6th Avenue goes practically right through where your dad's hardware store used to be there on 152nd.
Yeah.
So that road never used to go through to 150th before, and when they put in the condominiums and the library.
Yeah, you're right.
They made a street there.
Yeah.
But
I remember very, very vividly the 152nd was a dirt road. I can remember that, and I can remember when right after they paved it. So that goes back. I was a pretty young guy at that time. So
yes,
that was a long time ago.
Yeah, then there were farms scattered all over the Burien area, along 153rd and 52nd, 150th. Oh, far over is 146th where you lived.
Yeah. 146, 148 were all fields, and like you said earlier, chicken farm, a lot of chicken farms. I don't know why chicken farm, but that seemed to be the crop they raised in those days.
Yeah, I think the kind of be in that area, the Ironside family had maybe a chicken farm in there too. But yeah, well, that was an interesting history there. I'm sure glad that we got an opportunity to record this, because it's very interesting to me and the viewers. So,
well, I appreciate it, Roger. And like I said earlier, it's just it was a good opportunity when I grew up in this area, and there's so many people that influenced my life and how I led my life. My dad's obviously I adored him, but there was coaches along the way that took us under wing and kind of made sure we were going in the right direction. So very fortunate.
Yes, and I know we met at the Highline Alumni Golf Tournament.
Yes, we did.
at the Auburn Golf Course, and that was good. I'm sure glad and a good friend of mine, Dan Galloway, is also your good friend. So kind of put two and two together, and now we had a good conversation here.
Yeah, Dan's been a good friend, and we worked together before my retirement. He's still involved with the company that we both represented in those days. So good people for sure. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Dave. I'm sure glad that we did this.
Roger. Yeah, this has been interesting, and it's been fun to talk about the past and hear your side of it as well. So.